Okay, Chassidus, welcome to the Chassidic discourse. We began yesterday, a new one. Said in 1977, Hada b'shalom, my soul was redeemed in peace from close to me, as the multitude were with me. So, redeemed. Who's being redeemed here? So one explanation is the righteous. Another explanation is God himself. God himself is being redeemed. How? Through our Torah mitzvahs, our study of Torah, fulfillment of mitzvahs. God gets redeemed, and as a result, we also get redeemed. How do we redeem God? Through the three pillars that the world is standing, which is the study of Torah, as we're doing now, through acts of loving kindness, charity, and the like, and prayer. Prayer in particular, with a minyan. Those are the three things. Now, since they're the pillars of creation, it means it has to be there at the beginning of creation. Even though the beginning of creation, there wasn't us. There wasn't, Adam wasn't there yet at the beginning of creation. He comes into the picture on the sixth day, Adam and Eve. Yet, it's their acts of loving kindness, study of Torah, and prayer that is the pillar of the world. So even though till that point it's really God's kindness that results in creation, that being said, nonetheless, since the world was created for that purpose, these three ideas, pillars of the world, are there from the very beginning of creation. So now to explain this idea further, because naturally we wouldn't think that way. Naturally, we would think, God creates the world, and then, okay, to further sustain the world, it's on politics and money. But really what sustains the world is Torah, prayer, and acts of loving kindness. Right? So, it's something added to the world. No, 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 no. No, it's part of the DNA of the world. So to further understand this idea, so a little bit quotes from a teachings from the Maggid. Maggid is the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, his Rebbe, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And his day of passing is actually Yutis Kislev in the year 1772. And also brought down the Alter Rebbe's teachings that our sages say, Da mal know what's above you. It's in Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers. And it says there, it continues, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all that we do is written down in a book. But they both take this statement as an independent statement. Know what's above you. What does it mean? So they really like that simple way, right? Know what's above you. Know that which is above you, that's above, is from you. What does that mean? That everything that happens in the spiritual world is a result of you, of me, and you. Oh, that's a big 180 turn. of how to see things. Doesn't everything come from heaven? Isn't everything is comes from heaven except for the fear of heaven, except for the you know choices that we make in life. Otherwise, everything comes from heaven. Um, yes and no. We affect heaven, not just this world, not just this world, but heaven. Um, Now, this idea that we affect heaven actually precedes even heaven. Heaven means the spiritual worlds, right? The spiritual worlds. We think the spiritual world is what affects this world, and the truth there is. It's a two, it's a two-way street, and we're going to learn something very fascinating over here. We touch not only we touch heaven, heaven is in our hands. It's up to us. What does that mean? Well, let's first understand the idea. This idea that heaven is in our hands is even before we serve God. What does that mean? So it says that God created us in his divine image, right? It's Tselem Elohim. So it gives a metaphor, the Maggid, of a person who has a son, and because of the great love that he has for him, right, in his mind, it's ingrained the image of his son, right? Son, daughter, doesn't matter. It's a metaphor, right? The child there's an indelible mark. Every parent knows that, right? Indelible mark on the mind, in the brain of one's child, or children, right? But for the sake of metaphor, just one, right? Now, that's only because we have the child, but God, who's past, present, and future, are all one. So in his figurative mind, or real mind, ours is only a figure of mind, because our mind has to take um, a space in the brain, right? That's where the mind is. It's it's limited to a place in the skull. God's mind, excuse me, doesn't have that limitation, right? His awareness doesn't have that limitation. Ours is a facsimile of his, meaning his is the real mind. Ours is just, some kind of facsimile, very much a second rate mind compared to God's, right? So, God, the fact that it's the indelible image of the child, in other words, that which is created in his image, since there's no past, present, and future by God, well, it's there before let's take me. I'm going to take me in a very personal way, right? And each and one of you can take it in that personal way. Before I actually came into a body, a soul in a body, that by God, there's no limitation of time. So, and not just a soul in a body, but did now a mitzvah, like right now I'm learning Torah, learning and teaching Torah both, right? Kind of double mitzvah. Um, I'm doing that right now. So this by me, this is only a reality in this moment because just like my my intelligence is limited to a place called the brain, right? It's not my finger. God doesn't have that limitation. So likewise, there's the limitation of me in this very moment learning Torah and teaching. Because by him, past, present, and future are all the same. Of course, we can't wrap our minds around that because we're limited. We're we're limited. Just we can't really wrap our minds of, intelligence not being in a place, in a specific limited, you know, place called I don't know, what is it? 3 pounds, 5 pounds of a brain. Can't imagine it. We just understand that so it is. So likewise, God, right? So even before I'm sitting here and I'm learning right now, I'm teaching right now, God doesn't have that limitation. So that thought that's indelible of me, of my child, in my mind, it's indelible in God even before I'm teaching this right now in my limited time and space, right? So not only that, the fact that I'm teaching right now is even indelible in the mind of God, as it were, in the thought of God, even before I was created. Hmm. This we can understand what our sages say that before God created the world, who did he take advice from? The souls of the righteous. What does that mean? It means God knew that he's going to have divine pleasure from the righteous. That um, that pleasure was there before God, even before the righteous were created as a soul and a body. So this is the same idea now, right? So in other words, God has pleasure in the righteous before they even do the act of the righteous. Same thing is the three pillars, Torah, Avodah, Gemilas, Chosadim, study of Torah, the prayer, and acts of loving kindness, are in the beginning of creation. That since God contracts himself in the image of the soul, even before he creates it, so likewise, the divine service of Torah, Avodah, prayer, and acts of loving kindness that are the three um, the three expressions of kindness. That's acts of loving kindness. Gvura is prayer. Power is prayer. And Tiferet is beauty. Compassion is Torah, which also reflect in thought, speech, and action. This is already done above, even before creation. Right? How? In God's contracting himself to his divine kindness, divine power, and divine compassion, which are the three, right? Okay, now that's not an easy idea, right? But let it sit and percolate. Um, okay, now that being said, in other words, Before I'm giving this class, before I was even created, God was already having a divine pleasure of me learning now Torah and teaching. And you too. I'm just, you make it personal for you. Yet that being said, nonetheless, all those things. So in other words, look at that. Before I touch God right now, I touch the heavens above right now in learning and teaching. Before I even did it, I'm already touching heaven. Heaven is in my hands before I had a physical hand. Just, yeah, in other words, God already had that pleasure because he doesn't have a limitation, past, present, and future. Doesn't have the limitation that I'm only doing it right now. Therefore, there was that divine pleasure before I was even created. Again, that's a little diff. So just to show you why, because in the end, all of creation was just for me to do this right now. So before I was created, there was already that divine pleasure. Not an easy idea. That being said, right, that being said, that which we affect heaven above is not as great as the very fact that I'm actually doing it now. I'm actually learning right now and teaching right now. Okay, well, how do we understand that? Why would that be? Well, King David says in Tehillim that God, Magid Vodav Yaakov, that God told his words to Jacob, which refers to Jewish people, V'chukav Mishpatav, and his statutes and his ordinances, he said to Israel, again, the Jewish people. What does that mean? So there's two ideas here. The first idea is that which God tells us to do, he does himself, right? And that gives us the empowerment that we could do the mitzvah. So God commands us to be charitable. Well, God himself is charitable. God commands us to put on tefillin. God puts on tefillin. Now, of course, he doesn't have physical tefillin, right? Bar mitzvah boy, for his bar mitzvah, he says a Hasidic discourse and explains this idea that God puts on tefillin. And we put on tefillin. We speak about God's greatness in our tefillin. God in his tefillin speaks about our greatness, the Jewish people. Right. Again, it's all physical, but like a parent, tells their child to do such and such. Well, it's only because because the parent does it, that becomes the empowerment for the child to be able to do it. So that's what God is doing. He's giving us an empowerment by the fact that what he commands us to do, he himself fulfills. Right. I'm not going to get off on a tangent, but with that idea, that I've asked a question. For example, we're not allowed to destroy a stone of the holy temple. Then why did God destroy the holy temple? Right? Why did he do that? If he fulfills the mitzvahs, there's a prohibition in the Torah not to. So then it explains, can't destroy for the sake of destruction. But if you destroy in order to build something bigger and better, then you're allowed to. Oh, like you can't destroy a synagogue unless you're going to build a bigger one in its place. Anyway, that's just to bring out the idea. And that idea is that we have the empowerment to fulfill mitzvahs. Why? Because God does them himself. as you would see in raising children, that if the parent, uh, you know, parent says to the child, says to their 12-year-old child, don't speak lashon hara, don't speak ill about your ill in a way that you shouldn't, right? Don't do that. Oh, now the parent is going to speak ill about a neighbor. What kind of empowerment is that for the child? Obviously not. So the parent can't speak it, and then they command their child not to do it. So that's what God does with us. Second explanation is the opposite way. We do the mitzvah, and that's an empowerment for God to do the mitzvah. Ooh, that's heaven in our hands. More on that to come. What does that mean? When we do it, we give an empowerment to God, and it's great. What's that? I understand that. I'll see you soon. Thank you.